Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and I am coming to you outside of the usual SCU surroundings, so I have to apologize at first. Those of you who have been around with us for a while, you know what time it is. I am in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, outside of St. Vincent's College, boots on the ground this week for Pittsburgh Steelers training camp, and I've got a lot of news and notes for you, but that also means that I'm recording from other surroundings, right? And just trying not to show messy beds and stuff in the background. But for those yins that are out there and you're listening on an audio podcast platform, you're not going to notice anyways. But if you're new and you're here from YouTube, this is not the usual production. I apologize. I had some technical difficulties with my microphone. I actually started this very show and had to restart it because everything's just not working the way you would want it to when you're in a remote location. But most things are pretty receptive to it. You want to hear the news that some of the observations that I got handwritten notes. They're multiple pages thick here. I got my roster, and we're going to have at it. There's some sexy stories that are out there, and I got to address some of these things just first out the gate. Fights. There was actually a better one here on Thursday than there was the one that was released in social media the day before that was like playground shoving match that got blown into a mountain out of a molehill. Guys had pads on the day before. They weren't wearing pads on Thursday. They were wearing pads earlier, previous 2 days. Probably wear pads for Friday Night Lights, which I'll be back to cover over the weekend or next week as well. But it was really a nothing burger. And it just upsets me to see how many people are out there doing things for, just clickbait, just the social engagement, not actual genuine news. People that aren't even here, that aren't even seeing it. Anybody who was actually here in Latrobe noticed that it wasn't much of nothing. Now, the Marvin Leal just totally plastered someone in, and it was a little more of something because they've had referees here this week. So the referees, the flags are coming. There was something after the fact that was a flag, and the coaching staff has been penalizing and making players run laps for flags, false starts, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of accountability out there. It's definitely like I said, there's some sexier stories that are out there, definitely with the position battles and stuff. And it's actually kind of weird that the first thing I really want to cover, aside from, the coaches, the new wide receiver coach, Zach Anzini, I think if I'm saying his name right, intense dude, Arthur Smith, they're in their face. They're in Pickens' face. I think the discipline that people are wanting that are here, and people are going to be like, oh, well, Tomlin doesn't. Get the hell out of here. Tomlin is an intense guy. He was yelling to Marvin Leal's name all day today, let me tell you. But the thing I want to start with is actually another free agent pickup and just special teams. It might seem a little strange to cover special teams, right? We talk about offensive linemen not being the sexiest thing. You go into the draft, Steelers get a center, Steelers get a tackle. They have the tackle from last year. And there's some things going on there, too, that we'll cover later in the show. But special team, Cameron Johnston, formerly of the Houston Texans, punter. First and foremost, I'm watching him on the other field today, just kicking the ball. I think the line of scrimmage from Christian Kuntz, the long snapper, was around the 30-yard line. So Johnston is kicking at least from behind, never ahead of his own 20, almost consistently over to the other 20. And it's landing in that zone, give or take a few yards either way, in the air. This guy is kicking it. Now, the net on this is probably more like 50-ish. But, the air yards is like 60 because of the line of scrimmage, right? The long snap, and then where he receives it, the extra 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage. This is an unbelievable tool for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have revamped their defense here in the offseason. Going to get the offense hopefully revamped as well. But if you remember last year, field position battle, that just means everything. And the deeper you can pin the opponent, the better. Johnston, one hell of a pickup. Now, the other thing everybody's going to have their eyes on, and I believe Mike Tomlin had a little quip about this as well, said this might be the most watched Hall of Fame game that's coming up here in Canton, exhibition game, the Bears and the Texans. Because of the new kickoff rule, everybody's interested in seeing what everybody else is doing. And that's no different here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, okay? You have Chris Boswell and Matt Wright, backup kicker. Now, Matt Wright was doing a lot of the heavy lifting in these kicking drills that occurred here on Thursday. And he's taking the ball end to end, facing sideline to sideline. So the football is not pointing out. It's not on a tee laying flat on the ground. And these are almost like a squib kick, like a straight line drive. This is the new kickoff rule. It's basically adopted, more bastardized, I would say, from the XFL / USFL / UFL, whatever you want to call it, Spring League football rules that have been in place for a few years now. And there's going to actually be returns. And it looks like from the way that you have the coverage teams and you have like sets of players, aside from the kicker's all the way back in like a kicking zone. You got like two receivers in this landing zone where the ball has to be, or else it's like a penalty or whatever, right? Because you can't do an onside kick until it's fourth quarter. You have to be trailing. You have to announce it, all these things. I know it's changing the game. Let's see how this rule turns out first. The change to the game, I think, will be kind of cool. And it's going to be nice to actually see like Cordero Patterson actually do this. And I heard he was on the sideline getting some work. Didn't see him out there yet. But it'll be cool to see it as there's more. Danny Smith, the special teams coach, is also very, very intense. The way they're setting this up, the way they're game planning for it. I think Matt Wright got the bulk of the work with this. And it looked really good because there were some that were like, actually had like a hop or a bounce off of these like line drives. And then it started to go back into like the end zone, and it's a touchback, or maybe not quite a touchback, 2-yard line or something where somebody's fielding it. Not all of them though. Work in progress. But Matt Wright, he's an accomplished kicker. Chris Boswell's the incumbent. He's the guy under contract. More than likely Wright, unless they roster or keep him on a practice squad because they could elevate him. Remember, everybody in the league, this is new, and they're trying to figure it out. They were saying Eric Reed, a safety, might be taking the kicks because he's capable. He was back up kicking like the place kicks and the extra points for Kansas City last year. They were talking about, hey, maybe instead of putting one of your kickers out there and then having to have them cover, where it's more dangerous because they got to run downhill. They're like the only guy running downhill. Everyone else is like in this straight line, like old school Braveheart battle lines or whatever, Revolutionary War, whatever you want to call it. Like the guys are shooting and the next guy comes up when somebody goes down. That's the way it is. If you haven't seen this, look it up online. They're just like in two lines, like almost like this. There's like this maybe 10 yards between them, paraphrasing, of course. And the ball gets kicked, goes over the head. Once it's fielded or touched by a kick returner, then everybody kind of boom, or it lands. I think if the ball lands, then it's fair game too. And what happens is the kicking team, they're full go running. The receiving team or the defending team on special teams, the receiving team, they kind of do like a little turnaround, jog backwards 5 to 10 yards, and then turn right back around to block and for their returners and try and make sure nobody comes through. Ball's coming out to about the 25-ish, still about the same kind of average for the kick returns from what I noticed. And it's also who's returning the kicks and the punt returners in these cases too. John Reese Plumlee, QB4 on the depth chart right now. They got him doing a little bit of everything. He's returning punts and kicks back there. Again, Patterson kind of shelved. Calvin Austin was part of this contingent too. Cam Sutton. Mike Tomlin never puts DBs back to return punts, but he's been part of this as well. I want to say, got to pull my roster out again real quick. Quez Watkins. Because when I'm writing these things down, I'm jotting notes with numbers, and I don't have them all. Do you have Quez Watkins' number? Is it on your bingo card? Okay, it is. 16. He's in that mix too. Let's see, I said Calvin Austin, and then Scotty Miller. Oh yeah, I'm going to be talking about Scotty Miller. Actually, you know what? That's probably a pretty good segue because we're not that excited about special teams, are we? I mean, there's a lot of activity going on with special teams. Trust me. It's because everybody's got to get this right. These games in September, the regular season, they still count. They're going to count in December and January, so you don't want to lose by not being able to cover, or maybe you win because you take one to the house. Wide receiver wise, Roman Wilson goes down earlier in the week, hurts his ankle, little like skip and around. Somebody said jet sweep, whatever you want to call it, but running the football. Not supposed to be overly serious. Might be back before the last preseason game. Should be back before the regular season. Kind of hurts his chances of making a bigger dent on this roster. You've got George Pickens running around. I called him a menace. Literally wrote it down here somewhere. He's going to make everybody look good. Whether it be Justin Fields, whether it be Russell Wilson, whether it be Kyle Allen, QB3, or this John Reese Plumlee, has not been throwing to Pickens. But it's been an interesting mix of guys with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't like to say over the last few years that there's been a defined first team, second team, third team, and even more so when you have the injuries, when you have the rookies. You got guys kind of working with everybody. And George Pickens is just, he had some good on Wednesday. And earlier this week, some good battles with undrafted corner Beanie Bishop. It's somebody that myself and Flash were talking about as a potential camp sleeper, camp phenom. He is as advertised thus far. He has been mixing it up, and I think I have him listed. Bishop, who wears number 30, the kiss of death dual roster thing. Don't let that fly in your face too much, because Cam Sutton is really like the guy they probably would want playing corner. They have him playing as a reserve safety alongside Miles Killebrew deep on the depth chart, okay? Probably because they don't have enough other bodies at safety, which is another scary thing to begin with. But Beanie Bishop, if you happen to be out there in a yellow or gold, I should say gold, not black and yellow. We know it's black and gold. Jersey, number 30, rookie out of West Virginia. He's listed as 5'9", 182. And he's going up against George Pickens. And Pickens is listed 6'3", 200. And he won against Pickens. Now, one of them was just a complete pass breakup corner end zone. Pickens went to get his revenge. It was a Russell Wilson pass for sure on the second one, I think I have noted. And let me rewind a little bit here. A little bit of water. Run out of energy here. 90-degree heat in Latrobe, man. These Laurel Highlands or something else around here. Beautiful scenery. Happy for the 10:30 practices, because when they were getting this stuff in at like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, high noon, the temps, the sun overhead, it's just brutal, and you could feel it at the end of practice. So anyways, let me rewind with what I was going to say. There's a lot of things that I'm going to say here that are my personal observations. They probably don't go with the flow with some other folks. Some folks will not have a cross thing to say. I usually don't. It'll be a constructive criticism and not trying to be overly negative. So when I say something and it's about a player, I'm not necessarily saying, hey, this is the only source, the only way you should take it. It's just going to be, and I don't do it to be contrarian, just for the sake of having a difference of opinion or a hot take. This is just my real observations, one-on-one, what I saw with my own eyes. And what I see with my own eyes is that George Pickens, he doesn't come down with the ball all the way to the ground. He should have gotten this one over Beanie Bishop, and he didn't. They have referees there. Incomplete pass. And people are going to dog that. They're going to immediately, like what we said last week, myself and Flash. When somebody makes a good play, off to the Super Bowl. You can already hoist in the trophy. Put that guy in the Hall of Fame. And when they don't make a good play, whatever. And whoever tracks these, training camp stats and however many interceptions somebody threw and this and that, I'm trying to at least tell you play by play, maybe this wasn't the best judgment. Maybe because they're practicing in shorts, the defense can't be full contact. The quarterback has more time, or the quarterback's taking too much time. And then there's other plays where just lighting it up. And Russell Wilson, supposedly the calf injury from pushing a sled, has limited his reps. And I have some comments about that as well. And I almost think that that's kind of deliberate. I think that the Steelers are actually testing Justin Fields and or trying to give him first team reps, not only to show what he's capable of doing. Maybe they want to extend him. Maybe they're looking, for next year. Maybe they want him to have a little more seasoning. It's probably because he actually needs it. He's entering year 4. There are some things that I see him do where I'm like, oh, that's great. That's what I expect of a year 4 NFL quarterback. Then there's things I see him do that I'm like, nah, this is like his 4th year. What are you doing? Guy needs some polish. He is clearly not fully developed as an NFL quarterback. I will say this, and I don't think that's a cross thing to say. I don't think that's being negative. I think that's what everyone saw when the trade was made for a 6th round pick to get him from the Bears, untapped potential. And that's exactly where we're at right now. So is the Russell Wilson kind of sitting down? I think he's going to debut for Friday Night Lights. I really think he is. He's been doing a lot of throwing with third team guys, a lot of handoffs. But the first team drills has been more about Fields and also Kyle Allen, emergency quarterback. I'm going to tell you right now, if it gets down to a situation like it did where Mason Rudolph came in last year, I do not have the same level of confidence in Kyle Allen right now. I do have a sort of level of confidence with Justin Fields, but I'm going to boomerang back around to the wide receivers real quick because Pickens makes them all look good. Calvin Austin is also a guy. He's building a pretty decent rapport, as is Scotty Miller with Russell Wilson. And Miller is in on a lot of the third team stuff. So he has Allen throwing to him. And then Wilson's coming in at the back end of some of this 2-minute drills. Not the 7 shots. Wilson hadn't been in 7 shots. and just some different, whatever the drills might be that they're out there running, right? And I see Scotty Miller getting open. And when you're looking at the wide receiver depth chart, of course, you got George Pickens. He's a lock, right? Kelvin Austin, what was he, a 4.25 40? And Roman Wilson, the rookie, is like a 4.3. I mean, those guys, they're in. Kelvin Austin, he lays out and probably catches more footballs, or at least makes an effort to catch some footballs that you don't expect it from a guy his size. Kelvin Austin, 5'9", 162. Scotty Miller, 5'9", 174. It's just interesting. And Roman Wilson is 5'10", 186. You got guys that could fly. They don't necessarily have the size. So if you're talking about a Scotty Miller, I'm thinking about wide receiver 5, perhaps special teams. It also depends on who else might be able to fill in like a Miles Boykin role. If you remember, primarily as a wide receiver, he would be a run blocker if he came in on regular offensive snaps, or he's just more or less a special teams gunner on punt coverage. So Van Jefferson might be the guy at 6'1", 200 that actually gets a little bit more of this work. He's actually been looking pretty decent. He looks like a veteran wide receiver. When you take into account and wrap your arms around what I saw Darnell Washington make a grown-ass man play earlier today, just towers over everyone. It's just a mismatch. I don't even know how he got so open downfield. And it didn't really matter because the DB that was covering him, I'm trying to remember who it was. You got a number of guys like Graylin Arnold or Thomas Graham, and they're like 5'10" guys. And they're up against Darnell Washington. What is he, 6'7", 6'8", listed as 6'7" here. He's half foot taller. So he should be able to high point this football. And that's exactly what's happening. Pat Freiermuth, very much invested. We've been talking about maybe not enough respect on Pat Freiermuth's name to actually be like a wide receiver 2. Maybe even wide receiver 3, but give enough volume to where, Pickens is your 100 catch, 1,000 some yards, maybe 1,400 yard, 100 yard receiver every single week with multiple touchdowns. So crossing your fingers that I know there's still a lot of steam out there where people are talking about trade for a wide receiver. The more and more we go into this, I just think it's like, this is going to be Pickens' year. And if it is his year, he's getting a bag next year. And nobody else is. They'll just keep going back to the well in the draft. Kelvin Austin is still unproven as well. Roman Wilson is brand new. He's got to heal his ankle and get back on the field. Some of the other wide receivers, I'm just not really impressed with guys like Des Fitzpatrick, Marquez Callaway. They make some plays here or there, but Jacob Copeland, Deuce Watts, like some of these guys, and forgive me if I'm mentioning somebody that's already been cut off the roster, has already been moved since I printed this damn thing out. So, of course, the big one, Marcus Golden coming back. Let's talk about that for a second. TJ Watt did practice on Thursday, didn't practice the day before in pads. Nick Herbig still looking disruptive, but TJ Watt, he's been beating, he lines up, he's beating guys that are lined up there. He beat Broderick Jones. I'm seeing Dan Moore as a liability, but the offensive line is moving around. I'll get back to boomerang back to that in a second. But the outside linebackers, Marcus Golden, good move. Veteran player, up 4 sacks last year. This is a depth move. It's also a guy that can play on special teams as needed, especially, point after, field goal units, stuff like that. Also, it's a guy where you don't want your multi-million-dollar edge rushers, not only TJ Watt, but also Alex Highsmith, just straining themselves through all of this. I think they've got enough work in. They saw that some of the other young guys that they were maybe looking to develop just weren't going to ascend to be that other edge rusher that they needed. You got to be at least 4 deep here because, knock on wood, somebody like Watt gets dinged. Somebody like Highsmith ends up out. Nick Herbig, I think Nick Herbig is going to be I think a breakout player depending on the volume he gets this season. But you're not going to want to rely on that. You saw what happened in Buffalo when TJ Watt got hurt. TJ Watt is a game changer. You need to be able to keep something going. Like Malik Reed a few years ago, traded from Denver, veteran pass rusher, just wasn't cutting it. Mark Ingram. Nope. I think I got the Melvin Ingram. I'm sorry. Wrong Ingram. Melvin Ingram. Just those guys weren't cutting it. And you're not going to expect a whole lot from Marcus Golden, but at least that he's a team player. He was already there. So the signing became official here on Thursday. And I think he just adds something else to the linebacker group. I'm going to stick with the linebackers for a second. Peyton Wilson flies around the field, expecting a lot more from him. He stands out just enough, but again, when you're out there in shorts, it's hard to like really grasp. When you had pads on, Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen bringing the heat, let me tell you. Mark Robinson also looked pretty decent. Tyler Matakevich got a good shot in there, but he's going to be a special teams ace primarily. So you can't expect much more when it comes to the other backups there. So let's flip over to corner. Joey Porter Jr. with these referees that are out there, he's been getting a little handsy. He's been getting some flags thrown his way, and I know that was a knock that was on him coming out of the college ranks. And you don't want to see that necessarily. So Dante Jackson, he's been hit or miss too, but George Pickens, like I said, I feel like he's on the cusp of being an elite player. So it's really difficult to kind of gauge how much of that is just George Pickens and George Pickens doing George Pickens things as opposed to some of the other corners. I mentioned Beanie Bishop already, Cam Sutton, guys like Corey Trice, Darius Rush. It's tough for some of them to stand out, even when you're talking about your safeties. I was looking at Graylin Arnold, who's been around, various practice squads and camps over the last 4 or 5 seasons. Kind of a tenured pro, but maybe just not sticking. And of course, here we go. This is actually a shot there with Beanie Wells. This is the one that was not with the high point with George, and I think he didn't come down with it because the other one was just swatted right down. So you see the size difference with the corners. I'm not worried about this group though. I think they're going to be just fine. And Porter, he's getting some of that out of his system too. So I don't read too much into it. If you are reading that anywhere else, then that's just, I think that's fun conversation. Minka sat out on Thursday. He was in on Wednesday. There's been, some rotation going around with different players. And likewise, like the defense is usually over on the far field. So you get to see the offense front and center. There's usually a lot more to talk about offense. I don't know that we're always worried with defense. Some of the veterans getting days off here or there. I think Sumalo on the offensive line was off the day before. He came back. And then you had, you had Nate Herbig, who is also playing center. They're rotating that around quite a bit. So Arthur Smith, what they're doing is really interesting. And you see Arthur Smith, he's got a walkie-talkie, he's calling in plays. You're seeing some different things that are out there that I did not see with Matt Canada. Obviously, it's someone with tenure that's been around in the NFL for a little bit, and it just has a different way of going about business. And I think he's being permitted by head coach Mike Tomlin to do things in the fashion that he feels is best. This offensive line, though, it just has the imprints of Mike Tomlin not wanting to play rookies. You still have Dan Moore out there as a starting left tackle, but then the second team, they're moving like Broderick Jones over from the right to the left and bringing Troy Fatanu in over on the right side. And I'm there, I'm like, come on, man, can we just stop like screwing around with this stuff? And Zach Frazier too. Like I said, they had Herbig playing guard, and Herbig playing center. So Herbig was playing some left guard, and then Herbig was playing first team reps at center. He'll be the backup center, it looks like. Not seeing Spencer Anderson in the same capacity. He's been playing guard over the course of this past week or so. And that's about it for the offensive line. I just don't know how they're going to gel, but some of this I think is going to come to fruition a little bit more as camp progresses. We get into the preseason games and you're making some cuts. I think Mike Tomlin knows some of these guys are veterans, and you don't have to mess with the veterans, right? You could just leave them be, and you already know what they bring to the table. You don't have to necessarily grind their gears, so to speak. So let's see, who haven't I covered? Running backs, Najee. Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren he's a Tasmanian devil. He's looking to hit or be hit, even with just a helmet on. I'm always seeing him down on the field. I hope it's not to the detriment of his own health. Anyone else at running back, they're so far of an afterthought to me on this roster that I don't think there's anyone that really stands out that's worth speaking any kind of volumes about. Tight ends I talked about a little bit as well. Oh, Michael Pruitt. He's making some nice plays. I didn't realize how small of a tight end he was. He's like Connor Hayward size. What's he wearing? 81? Pruitt's only 6'2", 258. You got Connor at 6', 230. So, I mean, you give or take a little bit. They're like bowling ball size guys, maybe mainly blockers. Now, Connor Hayward, he's out there and he's making some plays. He laid out for one or two passes here or there. He's willing to pretty much stick his nose in there and do whatever's asked of him. So that's always a welcome sight to see. Going back to the DBs just for a second, I'm trying to think about where I should just start with some of these, because I have a lot of stuff and a lot of notes with 7 shots and stuff, because I want to get to the quarterbacks, and it's probably going to be a lot more long-winded about like allowing someone like, for example here, 35, Graylin Arnold, kind of like a fit, like I was saying, in quotes, maybe fifth-year veteran, right, out of Baylor. And he picks off Justin Fields on like a very like errant, ill-advised pass, like something that Justin probably shouldn't have put out there. And you see a play like that, and you're just like, man, this is what everybody was talking about. This guy might just not have it when he came over from Chicago. And the thing is, Justin Fields will surprise you, and he'll come right back on the very next play and make a play that's just like, holy crap, this guy was a first-round pick. Yes, he is a future like franchise player. It's very difficult for me to actually peg where Fields is. I think the best way I said it, and I was texting some of this over the Flash too. Got my cousin here with me at camp. He chickened out on being on the show, unfortunately, because I was going to let him offer some 2 cents too. He doesn't like the O-line rotation here, but we had the same observations with Justin Fields. We watched him, through his whole Ohio State career too. And it's like sometimes it just doesn't see the field. He doesn't see like what's open. I know I had some 7 shots here, passes that are behind, passes that are underthrown. A lot of it, his timing is off with like George Pickens. Some other guys, his timing's on. Sometimes he finds Pickens like quick slant out of the slot, 2-minute drill, boom, nails the guy. Also found him, I want to say back of the end zone, 2-minute drill too for a TD. Pickens makes a hell of a grab. It was a hell of a throw. It was right in the middle, like right down the middle, right below like the field goal posts. And Pickens gets toe tap, both feet in. The referees who were there in shorts as well, getting some practice and work in, and they haven't seen this kickoff thing either. So it's kind of funny seeing them try to position themselves where they need to be or supposed to be on the field, right? But Pickens gets both feet down, and you're like, holy shit, this Justin Fields guy, he might actually have it. It's so tough for me, because for as many good things I have for Justin Fields, you start writing them in one column, then you have like other things in the other column. And what some people are seeing is they're not understanding, and this goes for Russell Wilson too, who hasn't been doing a whole lot of throwing. I don't know if that's a real calf injury or this is just a test or showcase for Justin Fields for other reasons. But Russ, you can tell Russ is a much more polished quarterback than Justin Fields. He had plenty of praise for Justin during the week and for him filling in as a QB1. But you see, Russ is it looks different, right? It looks like a guy that's been a 9-time Pro Bowler, that's been to a Super Bowl, that has walked that line before. And again, it's tough to say because I'm not seeing him in the same exact situations as Fields when it's a full first team type thing. You're just seeing Russ kind of beat up on, there's some third stringers. There are some starters that are here or there. Sometimes, like I said, they put Pickens in and they have Russ throwing to Pickens and they have Beanie Bishop in coverage. So I don't want to be overly like on the downside. TJ Watt is a world record. He puts the pressure on. You see Fields, all of a sudden, then he has to scramble, or he's holding on the ball, still looking for, like, the coverage is great downfield, can't find, but every now and then there's like one where you're just like, boom, like, let it go. There was one where it was like Austin and Pickens, and it was like you could have had, it's NFL open, take your pick. And the one thing I liked with Kenny Pickett was I felt like Kenny Pickett had the anticipation. I also felt like before he went through the concussions that he was going to stand in there and take a hit. If you remember him doing that against the Jaguars in a preseason game, and then it got a little less likely, and then he started to get the happy feet just like Mitch Trubisky. And I think that's the thing that just kind of destroys these guys. They just got to learn to settle in the pocket sometimes. But when that pocket collapses so fast because you cannot defend against a defensive player of the year like TJ Watt, then you understand where I'm coming from with that. It's almost like you got to sit TJ Watt out so you could let these plays, like, at least get the work in and try and learn how to execute these plays because then it's not going to work in the regular season because it just keeps getting wrecked. And of course, they're not trying to strip sack or anything like that. Bringing that back around, something that myself and Zach were talking about last week. Where is DeMarvin Leal going to play? And he actually started kind of more of a real fight. Like I said, he buried someone in practice. It was one of the backup or third string linemen. I was trying to think. I wasn't sure if that was, Dylan Cook was wearing 60, but I can't say it was Dylan Cook for sure. It could have been any number of other guys that were out there. So Leal's been playing as an edge. He's been playing outside linebacker. He's been getting good pressure too against, like, we'll say the junior varsity type guys. But, as I'm saying that, I realize that you got two veteran quarterbacks that hold on to the ball probably the longest of any other quarterbacks in the National Football League. And they got to make this move. I'm going to be banging my drum against this. This might be, the last we see of number 65, Dan Moore. I could see some hesitancy of, basically three first time guys on the line, because Broderick Jones hasn't started at left tackle yet in the National Football League. Fatanu looks pretty good out there, but again, playing against second and third string guys that might not be on the roster come September. I don't know. And I understand that Dan Moore has started in every single game that he's been eligible to play in, but sometimes experience isn't good experience. And I just keep watching, and there's times maybe in the run game, he could pave the road a little bit more for one of the backs that's running behind him. And the backs look good. And they were running off the left side of the line the day before, except there was one overload on the right side with the tight ends, and that worked as well. They were running left tackle, left guard, getting in during 7 shots. I had it somewhere that was here, 2 tight end from an empty set, nobody in the backfield. And then Najee comes back. Oh, they actually moved back into formation. That's what it was. It was empty. They brought Najee back out from playing wide into the backfield, and then ran over that overload off the right side with the 2 tight ends. They can catch you the 2 tight ends were, though. Sometimes there's just so much activity going on, and the guys have their numbers up in their pads, and it's rolled up, and you can't always see. You're like, oh, is that Jalen Warren 30? No, maybe it's somebody wearing 38. So that's also, I think, where some of the confusion, some of the things move so quick, and you're trying to catch who threw what to whom at what time. So I had Fields and missed a couple. He missed a quick slant pass, was behind Pickens. That's happened. And I guess the best maybe description for Justin Fields at this time, as I'm starting to lose my voice again, no worse than Kenny Pickett. Okay, as long as he protects the football, ill-advised throws, you're gonna have some of that. You're gonna have stuff that gets tipped. A lot of passes batted at the line of scrimmage between, and that's something that it's kind of refreshing to see, but it's also could be worrisome with the shorter quarterbacks that are in that backfield. So I know a lot of people are like, well, is it a Fields versus Wilson competition? I don't believe so. I don't believe for 1 second that there's a legitimate competition. I think we're getting some of that coming from folks who aren't actually there in the building looking at it. I think the people that are in the building, that are witnessing and seeing these practices, see how firmly this is Russell Wilson's team. Just I think the Steelers, I think Mike Tomlin, I think Arthur Smith, I think they're comfortable with him already. They've already seen what he can do in the offseason. Now we're putting Fields out there, new environment, people everywhere, live, hitting, pads, the whole 9 yards. Let's put this guy in more of a situation to see if he, sinks or swims. And I think that's where this is coming from. Maybe Russ is legitimately hurt. Maybe it's just an excuse. I just feel, actually, Craig Wolfley said this on one of the Steelers Nation radio shows over the past week covering training camp. If you aren't listening to those over on the Steelers app or Steelers.com, please do, because those guys are fantastic. But the one thing they really don't do is you don't get into too many details. Even myself, I'm a little vague. Not supposed to be showing video. All those things that Zach and I were talking about last week. They put out an announcement, and they pretty much said, hey, for the enjoyment of everything, folks, you can't do this. Please don't put it out there. Please don't be using telephoto lenses, this and that. So hopefully, they'll talk about things, and they'll say, oh, look at, Pickens just made a really nice play over whoever. And that's about the most that you're going to get from it. Whereas one thing that Wolf said, he's like, it wouldn't put it past you that Mike Tomlin just went out, kicked Russell Wilson in the leg, and then said, oh, you're hurt. You can't practice. And then that kind of puts the pressure more on Justin Fields. It might put some pressure on Wilson too, to be completely honest. He's got to look at this other guy who could be taking his job. What if Russ doesn't do well this year? What if he gets yanked like Mitch Trubisky did 4 games into the season and then Justin Fields goes out there? Both of these guys are operating under 1-year contracts. They're both trying to extend or, they're looking for extensions for new contracts next year. They're looking for stability. So, I think that puts some pressure on Russell Wilson as well. But I just have my sneaking suspicion about the whole thing. Now, I'm starting to look through. I think I've covered everybody that we needed to cover: skilled positions, defense, special teams. I'm looking to see if there's anybody else. Jeez, Calvin Austin. Yeah, he's quicker than a hiccup. I mean, he's just got the jukes. Van Jefferson shook Dante Jackson out of his boots again today. It was a comeback route. This is a kudos or a praise for Justin Fields. Timing route, and boom. I mean, he just turned. Justin saw that the guy, Jackson, there was separation. Then he fell. Jackson fell. Ball was already delivered. That was good stuff. It really was. It was like the one good play you had with Trubisky and Deontay Johnson all the time. That was about the only thing Trubisky could do. Trust me, Fields can move, and he can move with his feet, but I think there's like an emphasis on making sure that this dude actually goes out there and throws the ball, chucks it a little bit, and just doesn't rely on his feet too much. Let's see, who else did I have on here? Scotty Miller, yeah, all the time, man. Had some Fields trying to in front of the pylon. Some of those weren't necessarily incomplete. Tries to find some guys sometimes. These are things some of it they're just working on. Let's see. I had to note about the quick slant. He ends up finding John Reese Plumlee's throwing some picks. Kyle Allen's throwing some errant passes. I mean, it's very clear that those guys are a 3 and a 4 on this roster. I had a note here that Fields may have held the ball for too long on this one, and that it probably would have been a sack in most situations in the National Football League if he didn't get rid of it. But again, he's working through and just trying to find something or trying to complete plays for the sake of practice as well. But that also doesn't bode as well with the offensive line, not just the quarterback, right? Pat Freiermuth, one-on-one drills. I'll tell you, Patrick Queen was with him like step for step for step, and I think this one was from Fields, if I remember correctly. They were covering each other one-on-one, and Pat got there and rate that whole catch radius thing that we were talking about before. He's looking pretty darn good. Let me see. Fields, he found George Pickens deep. I was wondering if this one ball was a little underthrown. I think if he leads him a little more, that's definitely a touchdown in a real game situation. In this situation, there was so much separation with George Pickens, and I forget who was covering, but they ended up catching back up to George by the time the catch was completed. There was another one that Connor Hayward lays out for, and you didn't know whether it was for Pickens or Hayward, and Hayward ended up being closer to it, but still had to reach out for the ball. Pickens probably could have come back for that one as well. So it's kind of just almost put in an area, and they kind of ran 2 routes, one that was a little shallow and one that was a little further down the field. So once again, I got to emphasize many times over, this is practice, but these are good things, and these are things that are working on. And it was also nice to see Hayward make the play. And you also know the Pickens, like I said, he might be one of the bigger stories coming out of this camp, aside from people wanting to talk about, Beanie Bishop is like maybe a camp phenom or something like that. You're talking about your underdogs, but the true guys that look like in years past, it was like James Conner, man, he looks like a new guy. Look how fast he is out there, or Juju looks good or something like that. This year, that is George Pickens without a doubt. A lot more things on special teams. There was a lot. I have a note about JPJ just getting handsy with the flags. Scotty Miller keeps getting open. Van Jefferson's pretty good. Jalen Warren, nonstop motor. 2 different, let's see. That was the interception, ill-advised throw I already mentioned. You had Cam Sutton playing a little bit of deep safety, and DeMarvin Leal as outside linebacker. I think I covered all of the bases. If there's something that I missed, it'll come back in my brain. I'll be like, I forgot that. I'm going to catch you early next week ahead of the Steelers' first preseason game. So that'll do it for me here. My name is Joe Kuzma. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I am here in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. If you happen to be out and you see me walking around, say hello. I don't mind chatting up some Steelers football with the fans. And that's about it. best I could tell you is don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I think I said that already. Leave a rating and review wherever you may be watching or listening from. Hopefully the quality of this show came out okay. I apologize once again because some of the technical things in working remote don't always work out to my benefit. So, but I'd like to bring you some new content. I'll be back in the studios next week to do some more of that as well. Until next time, as we always do when we close out this show, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.